All right, welcome everyone. You're here watching the Java Champions Conference, and so good to have you all here. Let me thank Ken Fogel for organizing this. It's totally awesome. So you can hear us. If you can see us, please say hello in the chat, right? And today we're gonna have here the one and only, Mark Heckler. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Hey, my friend, how are you? Great. All good here, I think. We'll find out. How are you doing?
That's so good, right? So Mark is a develop advocates for Java and the JVM language at Microsoft. He's a conference speaker, Java champion, Kotlin developer. He's also good friends, and I just learned that he's a registered pilot, right? So that's even get better, right? So I see Rodrigo Graciano watching us here. So hey, Rodrigo, how you doing? Right, two great champs, right? So that's great, Rodrigo. I see Eric. We can see and hear you. All right, Mark. So that's up with you. Whenever you're ready, let me know, and I'll put your screen up. So if you
I'm
guys,
ready. I do just want to say love to you all. Much love. I see Rodrigo, Eric, and of course Bruno. I just have such Sebastian got a lot of great people around me here, and that's great because I don't know if this is going to work. So if I the more brains we have together on this, maybe the better chance we'll have to succeed with it. I was just telling Bruno that I had just updated Mac OS a couple days ago and everything seemed fine. But this morning I've literally had 3 crashes. So if for whatever reason everything freezes, I will reboot, reconnect, and we'll dive right back in where we left off. So, yeah, crossing fingers. Hey, Jesper. Okay. Yeah. So hi, everybody. Join in the fun, and hopefully this will go pretty well. We'll find out. Let's see. Let's always helps when you're on the right screen. Ha! Okay, so hopefully everyone can see those slides. If not, please speak up. I'm going to do my best to focus on this main screen, and I'll peek over here in case anybody's like frantically waving that I've gone silent or something's happened to the video or the slides died or whatever. And we're going to go with the slides for a little bit, kind of to cover some ground, establish context, and then we're going to jump into some more fun stuff. So, but anyway, yeah. So thanks for joining the J Champions Conference. I'm honored to be here. I actually got to attend and participate and speak in one that was live prior to the pandemic, and actually this is. It's better and worse, right? The commute is so much better, and of course the crowd is so much more wide ranging, which is wonderful. Do miss seeing Ken in person, giving him a hug, but maybe next year. But welcome to this talk, as I like to call it, powering the push to production. Which this is a multipath live action adventure. Normally I say live coding, but I'm not going to be doing, well, not much coding. I mean, just the tiniest little bit, because the focus is not on writing the code, developing the app. It's on deploying the application. I'll get into that more as we go. As Bruno mentioned, my name is Mark Heckler. I'm principal cloud advocate of Java and JVM languages at Microsoft. Yeah, so a lot of times people are surprised. Microsoft and Java, yes, Microsoft loves Java, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll see just how much. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, I hope at certain breakpoints in here to answer, to field a few questions, and to discuss things a little bit if there's time. If because I'm going to be doing some live deployments, I do have some things to show while I'm doing that. But if I have a few minutes, I'll jump over and we'll do some Q&A there. If not, at the end. But you know what? If you're like me, you think of the best questions or feedback 10 minutes after everything shuts down and you move on to the next talk. That's perfectly fine. Reach out to me via email if you must, or better yet, on Twitter/X. For what it's worth, I'm still on there, and I'm probably much more responsive on there than email. So take that as you see fit. Who am I? A bit about me. I am an architect and developer by background. As I mentioned, I'm an advocate, which means that I get to code and talk about code. So that's just that's ideal. I love it. I am an author. I've co-authored several books. I have contributed content and code to several books. I've solo authored a book, and I'll get into that a little bit more as we go, but I'm particularly proud of that one. I am a Java champion, Java 1 Rockstar, Groundbreaker Ambassador, Kotlin developer expert, and as Bruno mentioned, a licensed instrument rated pilot. Because everyone needs a hobby to fill in that vast amount of spare time we all have. But it's good. It's a good challenge. It's good to shift your perspective to a few thousand feet or meters, if you prefer, above the earth. So it's fun. It's good to exercise your brain in different ways, and that's a relaxing and intense, ironically, way to do that for me. So the book, this is the book that I solo authored, and I'm particularly proud of this. Not because I feel like I couldn't have done it better, because every author will tell you if they just had a little more time, they would have added this or that or changed it. But I feel like it came together pretty well. So if you're interested in checking it out, the link there will get you a free 7, 10, I don't know, days free trial for Safari Books Online. And you can check that book out. Every other book they have there, I believe. And of course, the book has a Twitter account, Spring Boot Book. All the code in there, save the data feeder application, is written in both Java and Kotlin. So if you'd like to see how the other half lives, kind of compare notes, it's all in there. So yeah, check it out if you're so inclined. So this talk, most of you who know me know that I love to sling code. I love to write it, build up from zero, get to something really cool. Hopefully, I think cool anyway. Your mileage may vary, and show it off and do some really fun and cool things. But just like testing, deployment is often overlooked in terms of subject matter. And I feel like that's a very serious oversight, because no matter what you do, no matter how elegantly crafted your code is, no matter what kind of problems it solves, until it's deployed, until it's in the hands of those who need it to accomplish their mission, it's at best an academic exercise, at worst a toy. It may be a very fancy toy, it may be really cool, but if nobody can use it, I mean, it's like you never did anything, right? So I wanted to kind of dig into the deployment side of things today. And gosh, deployments are hard, right? Because not only are you doing things live and in cloud environments, connected environments, you've got bandwidth chewed up, for camera and voice, and I mean, so many potential pitfalls, which makes it all the more exciting, right? It's like walking that tightrope without a net. And we're going to do that. I'm also going to talk through some of the things that I've discovered. There's so much more to discover. It's a very dynamic field. It's a very wide-ranging field. But I'll tell you some of the things that I find particularly useful, maybe some more useful than others, pros, cons, as I see them. And of course, like everything else, my views are evolving, because the more I learn, the more I may have to contribute. So I do have a repo at the end, kind of a meta repo that I'll point you to. Please do watch and follow that, because I'm going to be adding quite a bit to that over time, as well as links to the slides, which I haven't published yet, but I will very soon. So how do we execute that push to production? Well, for those of you who have been around for maybe more than a year or two, maybe 2 or 3, let's say 2 or 3, there was the old throw it over the wall methodology, right? Because back in the days of yore, when devs and ops were separate, developers would come up with this beautiful, exquisite deployment package, and we would hand it off and run. That's not really an option anymore. And frankly, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think obviously there are pros and cons. We've had to take on a lot more work as developers. We've had to develop a lot more expertise in a lot more different subject areas. And sometimes that is a bit problematic. You'll see occasional memes and jokes about how little developers had to know, quote, back in the day, whatever that day was, and then how much more we have to cover, how much more ground we have to cover now. And that is all true. It's not always the best of times. However, the throw it all over the wall methodology, let's just admit it, it was terrible. So that's not an option, right? I think we've evolved out of that terrible time. Manual deployment, and as I mentioned, it's not as fun as it sounds. And it sounds terrible, because it is terrible. It's even worse. There are times that I manually deploy, and probably every one of us does, especially if you're just trying a proof of concept, you're just trying to spin something up quickly, and you think, I'll just push that out there. I'll do I'll issue this one command, or I'll go through the portal, or whatever the case may be. And that's not, I guess, as terrible as it could be. I mean, most of the time the tools are okay. However, when you do things manually, thinking that you'll only have to do this once, inevitably you don't just have to do it once. So I've kind of come into the mindset that even if I'm going to throw something together pretty quickly, even if I'm going to, theoretically at least only deploy it once, I almost always start kind of with a script, because with a script, you get consistent results. And if you do need to rerun it tomorrow, a week from now, whatever, you know exactly what you've done. And even worse, if you don't have to run it for a while, but you do have to return to it at some point down the road. My memory is not that strong. There's an old Chinese proverb that the weakest ink lasts longer than the strongest memory. And I find that's very good. Inc. in this case, meaning deployment scripts. So I encourage you to at least start down that path. The next line is scripting deployment. Now, for those of you who, I don't think actually any of us probably fall into this camp, but supposedly they're not teaching cursive writing anymore and to the kids. So if you can't read that next line, that's good. That's secret code. Only the older developers among us can read that. I'm kidding. That's scripting, right? So scripting deployment. I just thought it was a nice pun, visual pun. So that's kind of the next step along the lines of increasing your abilities, upping your game in terms of getting to production with your applications. And then, of course, CI/CD pipelines. And I do have a disclaimer at the bottom. Blurring of lines will occur. There's no may about it, because you can have scripts, you can have your deployment pipelines. Using those scripts, you can, well, you'll see there's there are a lot of edges that are pretty blurry among all those, but that's fine. In this talk, I try to isolate and deal with things in discrete points. They're not, none of them are, but I think it's much more useful to get those mental constructs in place and then see where they blur than to just go, hey, everything's just kind of a messy painting on the wall, and you decipher what it is. So we start with very clear edges, and then we realize that those won't remain that way. So, I kind of jumped ahead of myself here. So it's not an option. I mentioned that. Manual deployment, not so great. So let's go on into the scripting. All right. So it looks like I still have connection, so that's good. We'll continue charging along. Call me nervous, but after 3 crashes, you tend to get a little skittish on a live conference. So this is what I call the logical next step. And I say next step, really implying that should be reached pretty quickly out of the gate. So again, once you do a manual deployment or two, just for that quick one-off, you realize it almost never is. So I like to break this once again into platform-specific tools and platform-agnostic tools. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do work for Microsoft, so I'm covering Microsoft-specific, platform-specific tools. But regardless of the platform provider you use most or use solely or whatever, these tools will change, but you'll probably have a similar portfolio of tools at your disposal. And I'm going to pick on what I know here, or know best, I guess I should say, and kind of highlight the different aspects of those and what I see as pros and cons. And I should probably say your mileage may vary, because if you use these, you may have a completely different choice that you lean on. That's fine. You may have great reasons for it. That's great. Share them. Please let me know. And again, I'm open to changing my mind, because the more you do of things a particular way, the more you see shortcomings as well. So if there's a better way, I'm open to it too. But I'll show you kind of and tell you kind of what my observations are as we go. So let's see. I need to go ahead and cover these. I want to make sure I didn't expand this in the next slide or something like I did the last one. So ARM templates. ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager. And ARM templates are, in concept, they're a really, really good thing. I want to return back to that here in a minute, and I'll kind of expand on this, but I want to go down the first 4 and then I'll kind of loop back, right? So ARM templates allow you to templatize your deployment. Bicep is another option that lets you templatize your deployments. Both of those, the ARM templates and Bicep, are used by the AZ CLI at the bottom. The AZD CLI is the Azure Developer Command Line Interface. That is, I'll come back to that. The Azure CLI is kind of the Azure Command Line Interface, and that's the one I lean on the most heavily. And let me kind of loop back. Here begins the loop back. ARM templates. Okay, before I loop back, the Azure CLI lets you issue particular commands for a particular task that you're wanting to accomplish. And it has plugins. So if you want to deploy an application to Azure Spring Apps or Azure Container Apps or whatever, it has a plugin for that particular thing, or a database, or Key Vault, or whatever. And typically the way you do that is you issue a command and you have parameters, -- whatever parameter, and the value. So these commands get pretty long, and I'll show you some of those momentarily. And what you can do is replace those parameters with an ARM template, an Azure Resource Manager template, which is just JSON, right? So if you've ever used curl with the -d and passed in, data for it in a JSON format, that's very similar to what an ARM template is. So if you love JSON, ARM templates are your thing. I'm not as fond of them, just because, sometimes that gets a little tedious and cumbersome. which brings us to the next level, which is Bicep. That's a more concise language that you can use than the ARM templates. Does the same thing, but it actually compresses that, and it's very concise. It's clear, it's tight, and you can pass the Bicep file into your AZ-CLI, and it'll use that as inputs. The AZ-CLI itself, again, you can just pass the parameters, and that works pretty well, really. And the Azure Developer CLI, similar, but you can use different templating tools and different other tools, which I'll get into momentarily. But you can use any of those to kind of initialize your application. And I'm oversimplifying all of those to some degree, but that's kind of where I see things falling out. When I rely on a platform specific tool, typically I use the AZ CLI because it seems to be the closest to the, I hate to say closest to the metal, but the parameters are the most up to date. It feels like I just pass the parameter and the value. I can look things up very easily, and I'll show you the reference for that. Everything's really well laid out. So that's the way I kind of lean when I go that way. Now, then though, if we want to consider platform agnostic tools, and I do have that with an asterisk, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But platform agnostic tools like Ansible, Pulumi, Terraform, and many, many more. Again, I'm kind of simplifying here a little bit just for time. But these are some big ones. I lean on Terraform mostly, but as with all of these, they're not entirely platform agnostic, right? Because if you use Terraform to deploy to Azure or any other cloud platform, you're going to have a template, or in Pulumi talk, a module, I believe it is. So you're going to have something that is specific to that destination, to that resource you're wanting to use to create cloud resources within that environment. And each one of those has specific syntax, right? Because an option under Azure may have different configuration options than an option under some other cloud provider. So yes, the tools are platform agnostic, but when you get into the scripting of them, they're really not. So there is some limitation there as well. But I'll show you some of the script, some of the templates, or actually the script that I use based on a Terraform template from HashiCorp to do deployments, and what I use myself and why I like it. So when you get into CI/CD pipelines, take a drink here. You have a lot of options. Again, I kind of focus on the Azure leaning side, the Microsoft side, but also there are other well-established players and so many more in addition to this. Most of these I've worked with at some point in time, but really I'm going to focus on GitHub Actions because it's probably the easiest way to get started. It's convenient. Most of our code is out on GitHub. And it's just, there's so many ways to get there from here. Even within GitHub Actions, there are multiple ways you can create the pipeline. So you can do it from your IDE, you can do it from the Azure portal, for instance, or from GitHub. So many ways to get there from here. Super powerful, super easy, and literally all you have to do is git push. So that makes it pretty nice as well. So let's do this. How are we doing on time? We're doing really well, I think. So I'm going to just stop on that, and we'll switch to, let's switch here. Let's go to our, actually, let me start somewhere else first. Because in order to set up an environment, so I can do this very quickly, this kind of gives you a hint at what I typically do with my scripting. So I typically have 3 sets of scripts that I do for every environment. And it sounds rather onerous, but it's not, because most of this, as the old saying goes, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Same thing with these scripts. Even if I'm not going to use them to deploy, I will have a script that sets up my environment. So I can just create things and spin them up rather easily and quickly without much effort on my part. You find that if you spend less effort here, but you spend very focused, concise, precise effort, you can put it back where you really want it, which is writing better code, making better applications, serving your customers or community's needs better. So I define certain variables here. And I set things up to where I'm going to be deploying a couple different ways. Well, actually 3 different ways, but a couple of different ways from this one app, which is via the jar file sitting on my machine, or a container that I'm pushing to a container registry. So again, multiple ways to get there. And then of course the GitHub Actions, which just, I push code. And then if you notice here, and I want to call this out, I'm not ready to do the Terraform stuff yet. We'll get to that. But Terraform, let me put a pin in that. We'll come back to that momentarily. But Terraform requires a little bit more hand-holding. Not much, but a little bit more hand-holding to get the same things accomplished. So I typically run this initialization script to set up my environment. And then if I want to go ahead and deploy using Azure CLI script, this is just a shell script. The reason I like doing this, and you can do this in PowerShell or shell scripts, I mostly use Mac and some Linux with a side of Windows, but most everything that I do, even under Windows, is WSL too. So everything typically is a shell script. And I just do a few things. I create the resource group, and everything that I do, other than the container registry, which I have in a separate resource group, but everything that I do for a particular application deployment is listed, is logged, is stored, I guess you'd say, or categorized under a resource group. So then I create my container app environment, and I grab some information here for the service principal so I can use that to give permission to my container app environment to grab that container image from my container registry. If I need to do anything here for the container registry login, I push a container from my local drive out to the container registry. And then actually right now I have this commented out. This is just deploying from the registry to Azure Container Apps. But in this case, I kind of wanted to show off a little bit how you can just take this from a local jar file. So let me do this if I can. So I can actually just point it at an artifact, my jar file, and it will take that and craft the container around it and deploy it, which if anybody's been around long enough to remember Cloud Foundry and what a wonderful thing for developers it was, not so much for ops, but great for developers. This has a lot of that same vibe. It just makes things, again, dead simple. Now, if you want to push an image to the registry, again, there's a way to do that. And we'll see that actually through Terraform. I don't show it both ways here, but I do show it in different places, right? So all I have to do to get this started is to go ahead. I should have probably started this running before I started talking. That would have been really nice, but it's fine. Source, I can't even type. So I'm going to, let's see, scripts, and I have my personal data in here. I really don't. I need to relabel that. So we'll config that, and we'll kick this off, and we'll see what happens. So while this is running, why did that not, oh dear, I hope this isn't trying to lock up on me. I tried to resize that window, but it doesn't seem to be wanting to do that. So can anyone still hear me? There we go. Okay, good. So I think I have control back. That's scary. If anybody can hear me, please let me know.
Hey, Mark, we still hear you. No problems. Always good.
Yes. Okay, good.
Yes.
my machine suddenly just looked like it was kind of hung up, but it's as long as everything's still working, great. If not, please somebody raise their hand or cry out or something. So this looks like it may be working. I don't know. Let's see if this works. I was trying to resize this so we could show a couple of things. Well, it doesn't matter because I'll let this run. I can't show a couple of things at once if I'm going to do PowerPoint back up. And that is okay, good. That's no pressure. Hopefully the Mac won't see that and fold like a chair here. Wow, that's oh yes, okay, good. You know what? I've got template examples here. I'll show you this because it's clearer to see, but then I'll go and show you the examples and the actual reference pages because I think those are even better. But this is certainly much easier to see. For an ARM template, as I mentioned, you feed it into the Azure CLI the same way you just create JSON, which is pretty clean, right? If you're used to dealing with JSON all the time, every day, this is great. One thing that I forgot to mention, which is super helpful, if anybody here uses VS Code, Visual Studio Code for their, I found early on was really cumbersome, and now it's quite nice. There's a plugin, there's an extension for VS Code for ARM templates called the Azure Resource Manager Tools, and that allows you to syntax check as you go. It makes sure you don't miss a quote mark or anything like that. So that's super useful. Bicep. Same thing as I mentioned, it's not, I'll go back, it's not JSON, it's just a language. and that's pretty concise. It's pretty good. So that is an example of something you can use. You can create this bicep file and then feed that to your AZ CLI, and it goes off and runs successfully, happily. Let's see. So I don't want to get into the Terraform stuff yet. That's my next slide. Let me go back and just make sure that is running. And that does not seem like that's running at all. This is going to be a really short example. Now we'll find out. If it doesn't run, that's fine. I can actually just run one of my other ones, and I do have existing. It just seems really weird that hung up. Maybe I found the problem with my Mac hanging up and crashing earlier. So we'll assume that's the case. We'll assume that it is problematic, and we'll go on to look at our next one, and then maybe we'll return to this. Live demos, right? You just can't prepare for everything. So let's go and take a look at our Terraform option. Yeah, builds always eat performance. Interestingly, though, I'm just trying to, I am trying to do some things, but the resource consumption should be on the back end more so, but we'll see. I have to go back and check one more time. No, it's still just sitting there. Great. Okay, that's fine. Let's go on to our Terraform stuff, because this is, yeah, I see Eric. Well, you aren't wrong. I mean, if we had just me and in here, maybe Bruno, it would probably be running fine, but such is life. I have to stop and tell you, one time I was doing a workshop, and my co-presenter and I had run through the timing on this from multiple different locations. He's out in Western US, I'm in Central US, and we connected through different VPN endpoints and everything, and ran multiple times this demo to kind of get our timing perfectly aligned on how long it would take for each section. And we get there the day of, and it's at Microsoft, right? But it's a huge event. A lot of people are hammering the that particular region of Azure, and I don't know whether they were throttling it because it was all coming from the convention center, all the traffic at once, but everything took much longer than we expected it to. Completed successfully, but it took forever, it felt like. So even when you do all the best timing, it never works out when you go to production, right? Okay. Painful memories. Okay, so Terraform. Now this is where we start looking at different options that are not platform specific. And I have to tell you, I like Terraform. A colleague of mine likes Pulumi really well. I haven't worked much with that, but I have poked around in their docs. The docs look great, so I know I'm going to have to try Pulumi. But right now I've been doing a lot with Terraform for a long time. So let's look at a pretty simple example. I should go back and actually show you this super complex code example that I created for deployment. Talk about a toy. But again, the focus is supposed to be on the actual deployment, not the app. So I literally have an application that has one endpoint that just returns a deployed indicator. But with Terraform, typically you have a main.tf, which is your main Terraform file. That's your declarative file that tells what kind of resources you want to be created. Now, if you want to variabilize, if you want to create variables to be used by that main file, you will .tf file. Here's where it starts to get turtles all the way down. This is not complex at all. But if you don't want to store your secrets in Terraform or any other part of your repository, because if you notice, this is in my code repository. If you notice, I have my code here. I have a Terraform directory here, a package, and I have the stuff that I need under here to successfully deploy the app. This is great because it rides along with the application. That's so nice. However, you don't want to put things in there that are sensitive. So if you notice, most of my variables I have defined here, I don't have a default value or any value. I just tell what it is, a little bit about it sometimes. I tell if it's nullable or not. But for location, I want to default to the eastern region of the US for the cloud region. And then everything's really sluggish. Hopefully this will keep going along. Cross fingers. And the image tag, by default, when I'm creating a Spring Boot application and I'm just kind of running through things, it's going to default to 001 snapshot. The Docker ID is my Docker ID, putting in there as a default. Obviously, if somebody else, clones the repo and they have a different Docker ID, it will pick that up just fine. And this is where it's interesting. Terraform, if you notice, let's say we have this Docker ID variable. And when we use that in our main.tf, it's really sluggish. Then it will use that value var.whatever. Well, I'll just pick up ACR registry server. But even though that is defined here, we don't have a value passed into it. So if you try to run that without any kind of a value assigned to, like I said, we'll just use the ACR registry server because I found that quickly and it's right there. Scroll past it slowly. So it has to pick up that value from somewhere. And that is why I define these, because Terraform by default, by convention, if you have any environment variables defined, I'm in the wrong file. If you have any environment variables defined with a tf underscore var underscore, there it went, then it will pick those up and assign those, for instance, to the ACR registry server. And I've defined all these values up here to use elsewhere, and I could just make them 1, but I just kind of added the Terraform capabilities to this after the fact. So I can use this in both scenarios. I can use it for my AZ CLI. I can use the setup, the environment, for my my Terraform script. So the tf var ACR registry server, is picked up here as the ACR registry server, and it's used in the main.tf as soon as it switches to it. Boy, this is terribly sluggish, but it is used here. So that way I can externalize my environment, which is a good practice anyway. And I don't have to worry about when I check in my code, exposing secrets in my code. Now, I'm not even going to get into the whole, encrypted secrets and, data at rest and things like that. For this talk, that's another talk entirely. But you want to externalize your environment, especially sensitive values for your environment, to your system environment, and let your, in this case, Terraform process pick those up from the environment itself. So let's go back to our terminal window and we'll see. Come on, you can do it. There it is. And I'm just going to peek over here and see if that is running. The first one. Oh, it finally did kick off. Boy, normally this first part takes, 15 seconds. So we're going at what, 5 minutes now? We're probably not going to get through all of that one, but that's all right. I have some pre-deployed instances anyway. Let's see if Terraform treats us any better if it switches back to the next tab. And if not, well, while this is running, we'll just have a little Q&A and then we'll jump back into it after that. So come on, terminal. I'm trying to think what else I could close out just to try to get some more performance, but it's, I'm running out of options here. All right. Well, while I'm waiting for this to come back or at all. Yeah, so it is working. It's just working terribly slowly. Okay, so I tell you what, Bruno, let's jump in and do a few of the questions, and if this comes back, I'll kind of interleave Q&A with the Terraform deploy. Not at all what I intended, but you might as well have a good conversation out of it. So let's see, what questions do we have out there, or comments, just feedback? I see Mike saying Terraform rocks. I couldn't agree more. Hey, Deshaun, yeah, I didn't even see you there, man. Yeah, so I love Terraform. Interesting tidbit, and I'll just spill a little tea here while I'm waiting for this. Is cloud performance really so unpredictable? Generally, no, but I'm having some issues with my Mac just as of this morning. Like I said, I've run through a lot of stuff, crazy stuff, just the last few days, just trying different stuff just to see what'll happen, different things and tweaking things, and had zero problems until this morning, of course. But as far as cloud performance, coming to the other part of your question, cloud performance is affected by a lot of things. Part of it is the cloud. Part of it is just accessibility, like the pipeline. However, at this point, all I did literally is issue a command. So there's no bandwidth concern at all. If I was pushing a container image and I had maybe an issue with my ISP and bandwidth was severely constrained, that might be an issue. But just to issue a command like this, I mean, it should all be on the back end. However, again, I can't help but think, I wonder if it's just buffering and it's eventually going to get there, but we'll see. Okay, so, the one thing I was going to mention is Terraform. I typically lean on a couple of things, as you might guess from what I'm trying to show. trying, and so far it's not cooperating. But the AZCLI stuff and the Terraform option. With the AZCLI, again, you can feed it ARM templates, bicep files, but I typically just script it all in the shell script. The reason being with the Azure CLI, when you pass it ARM templates or bicep files, what it does, the same as if I'm doing the commands like I am, it will create REST API calls, and it will do its work that way. So they should be roughly equivalent. But if you're going to be creating a script anyway with the AZCLI commands and then passing in the data that are supposed to be by the commands, you're still going to have to create that script. So to me, it makes sense to use the options of the AZCLI and just maintain the one script versus that script and then a bunch of data scripts. Your mileage may vary. Now, here's something interesting I found, and I have worked to isolate it, and everything that I've come up with doesn't change the results very much. But I found that Terraform is actually faster to create resources and to destroy resources than our AZCLI. So I don't know that I have the final answer on that, but it is significant enough to be noticeable, which is yet another reason why I love Terraform, because it seems to work pretty well. That said, Terraform templates for any particular cloud technology, I mean, they can lag. So you have the updated API, for instance, if you release a new API for a particular thing, let's say AKS, Azure Container Apps, whatever, that will change. And typically the AZCLI changes pretty much in lockstep right with it. The Terraform template may be a little delayed. Maybe it takes a week for the new one to be pushed out or something. So if you want to be right in lockstep with the releases, typically you'll go with the platform specific tools. But Terraform is pretty hard to beat in terms of overall usability and performance. And it is just not, oh, look at that. It just, it switched spots on me. Weird. I must have dragged that when I didn't realize it. Okay, I'm going to start the Terraform process, and then we'll go back to some Q&A. With Terraform, if you're not familiar with it, typically you do a Terraform init, but I already have done that to go ahead and configure things. So I'm just going to do a Terraform. Actually, you know what? I could plan it. We'll take a look at the plan that it'll create. What could possibly go wrong? Pretty much everything, I guess. We'll find out. But when you do a Terraform plan, it will evaluate your plan and tell you what should happen when you run it next. And if there are any problems with your Terraform, your main.tf or anything else, it'll tell you that as well. So then you can fix that before you actually try to, yes, always plan first, absolutely, before you try to run the apply. And again, this normally is pretty quickly done, and yet here we are. So let's see. Let's go over and see if we can answer anything else or speak to anything else. Let's see. Mike says, if you containerize the build and deploy, then it's easy to change the pipeline executor. It just starts up the Docker image with secrets. Yes, absolutely true. Again, this is where we start to look at integration and kind of the blurring of the lines. But you're absolutely right. The more you just a blanket statement, the more you automate, it's a little trickier to get ironed out to begin with, but it's so much more repeatable and predictable and just less painful for us as devs. Let's see. Whew. Okay. Well, you can see this is just us, and this is entirely on my Mac, that Terraform plan. So let's see what else. Yeah, Terraform. Yeah, I like that tip with it going fast in AZCLI. I mean, it's not like you can go take lunch or anything like that, but I found that it's about just in my testing. And again, I've got to try to isolate if there's anything weird going on. Maybe I've got some configuration switch flipped, but it seems to be about 30% faster, which is significant. So if you have maybe let's just say a 9-minute process for deploying your entire, creating your full infrastructure, deploying your app, starting it up, and it takes 9 minutes using AZCLI, it might take 6-ish, maybe a little more. Using Terraform. And again, oh yeah, look at this. Wow. So it actually is reaching out, but we're having issues. I'm going to try that again. See if maybe our issues are resolved. Maybe it's just that StreamYard is taking so much bandwidth. I wouldn't think so, but oh well. Anyway, maybe I have ISP issues today. That actually would make a lot of sense. But yeah, so I looked at different things. There is an option to parallelize some things using the AZCLI. However, the one thing that I really thought would make a big difference with the parallelization literally finishes in seconds. So I'm thinking that that's not the issue. We'll see. I will be investigating all of this stuff more. So please do star and watch the repo, because I'll be putting all my results there and kind of the follow along. I have the meta repo out there. I have the component repos out there. I just don't have the full documentation for how to get there from here through all the options. So we'll see if this works. Okay, so yeah, Terraform does use a cloud API. Good point. Yeah, that's another good point. They do sometimes choose to use an older API, older but faster, and that's a possibility. Interestingly, I mean, everything works, and like all cloud providers, we probably could be better about deprecating versus just functionality falling off the map. Frankly, every library I think I've ever used could be better about that, but usually I don't always trust, but I typically lean into it's probably up to date if nothing absolutely is breaking, because almost inevitably, if something is using an older API, within a short time, something breaks, even if it's something small. But yeah, I need to research that. Let's see. Yeah, so this just is a total fail here on my running this stuff. Let's try something else. I'm just really curious here. I'm going to go to option 3, and then we'll see if we can just do a git push on a change to one of the coding repos that I'm using GitHub Actions for, and see if it all works behind the scenes. Because sometimes when life hands you lemonade, you make lemons, right? And then life's all like, what? Anybody recognize that quote? That is actually a quote I stole from a TV series. So, all right, so let's, okay, so here's my super complex. Come on, you can do it. It's just terrible. Okay, so here's my super complex application that I'm deploying. I'm pushing to GitHub Actions via GitHub Actions to deploy it. I'm just going to create another Git mapping because I need to just throw some code here. We'll call this J champions. There we go. Okay, so public string get. Oh boy, what happens when you're typing so much faster than the computer even responds? Yeah, that is not what I typed. Come on. Okay. You know, from GitHub, greetings, J champion. See if I can get that back there. And yes. Oh, wow, this is just painful. Okay, so I've saved that. Let's go over here and see if this will work. Surely something will work today. If not, then well, we'll just we'll cut straight to the get status. Come on. Wow, you know it's bad when. I mean, should just be instantaneous. Okay, back to Q&A. Try to avoid pain whenever possible. You know, so do I, but here we are. Of the provider. Look at this. Oh, it finally came back. Yeah, so I typically will use, for instance, the HashiCorp version of the Azure Resource Manager template. So that at least reduces by 1. Okay, so if I do a get add dot get commit, come on, get commit dash m YOLO get push. Take it? Maybe not. Normally I type really quickly, but not so far ahead of my shell. It's just you can do it. pushing or not pushing or whatever the case is. Oh, good, good, good. So something is sort of working here. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up the portal, and we'll take a look at some of these things on the back end, because this is just not going to plan, and that's fine. For ARM template documentation, as I mentioned, the documentation is superb. So if you go here, and I will have all of these links in the repo again after I'm done, I'll go ahead and add all those in. So the repo is a one-stop shop. If you just go to, and I'll show you the repo link at the end, but it's github.com/mkheck for me /PPP, powering the push to production. And then from there, I'll have all of this stuff documented. You can at least go there now and start it, watch it, whatever, and then I'll update it as we go. But the ARM template documentation is pretty awesome. You can get in and see what is an ARM template, examples of it, how to create them, the specs, and so on and so forth. Really nice. Bicep language, again, even I think a little bit nicer, because it's just more concise, super easy to work with. And again, another instance where there's a VS Code extension available for Bicep. So it's just, I think it's just called Bicep Tools or something. So you can install that, and it syntax checks you as you go along, which again keeps you on the straight and narrow path to developer productivity. The Azure Developer CLI reference, as I mentioned, it's there. I don't do a lot with this because this is the one I lean on, the AZ CLI, and this is super easy to get to. Within Microsoft, almost everything is an aka.ms link, and if you see that link right there, aka.ms/CLI. So that is your one true source right there. You go there. I'm not even going to refresh because heaven knows how long that'll take. But if you go there and you can just see what is it and your different components you can add, and then you can go in to reference the different things. Of course, the HashiCorp registry, which is where you find your templates and examples for each of your templates. So for instance, if I want to go to container apps and pull up the resources for that, you can see the example scripts. You can copy those and paste them in, get started. I actually, slight plug for GitHub Copilot and Copilot Chat. I actually find that it does a pretty respectable job of creating that first cut at a Terraform template. So that's a nice way to get started. Doesn't always work perfectly, because again, sometimes even if you specify Azure Container Apps, it thinks, oh, Azure App Service. But most of the time, if you're pretty specific about what you want, it does a nice job of giving you at least a starting point. So let's take a look at some of these deployed. Here is the one that was supposed to deploy using the AZ CLI. If we go to the application URL, I can click on it, but I already have that pulled up just for situations like this. I can do a refresh. You can see that it's deployed. That's nice. If we go here to our second one, this is the one that's deployed via Terraform. And functionally, it's identical. The difference being, let me go to the next screen and refresh here. But the difference being, when you want to tear it all down, right? So I'm going to go back to here. For Terraform, as you might remember, I did a Terraform plan, and then I was going to do a Terraform apply to destroy everything there. You just do a Terraform destroy, and it based on the resources you have defined, it'll go and destroy all those for you in one shot, which, by the way, is also faster than the comparable AZ CLI thing. I usually have a utilities, and then this is what I typically use right here, because as you recall, everything I put in the same resource group. So I just burn it to the ground. When I'm done with it, I delete the whole group, and everything, all the resources are freed up that were under that. So that makes it really nice from a developer and development and deployment perspective as well. Now, from GitHub. So I should have actually pulled this up from GitHub. I did pull up, let's see, I did pull up well, we can get there from here, right? So here's the script that's created, and there are many ways to create this GitHub action script. You can actually handcraft it, should you want to do that kind of thing. You can do it from VS Code, which is really nice. You can do it from within here. You can do it from the portal. So if you go back to the portal, and as you can see, I've got, I mean, again, indistinguishable. I just have a GH on there to indicate to myself that I've deployed it from GitHub. But if you go to your continuous deployment, and you can configure this to point to a particular repo, and it will create that script for you to deploy to this environment. So if you script or manually create just the environment on Azure, you can just say, hey, feed me that repo once you build the application from it, and it does it. You can see the workflow file, it points directly to it, and then you can, basically clicking that will bring you right back to here. So pretty nice. Let's see. So if I go to, yeah, so let's take a look. Actually, it seems pretty responsive now. So maybe we have some feedback. We'll find out. Yeah, so everything looks okay there. Succeeded 3 minutes ago. Okay. So if we go back here and we'll refresh that, look at that. So at least something's working, right? I guess it was bound to happen. Accidents happen. Let's see. Was there anything else that I missed? Oh, the repo. Yeah, I'll come back to this, but here's where the current state of it right now. As you can tell, it's just github.com/mkhex/ppp for powering the push to production. And then, of course, I have links to the repos that feed this. Again, the apps are trivially simple. The focus today is on the deploying, ironically, and then the related presentation, which I'll have uploaded shortly. And then AZD CLI, I already pulled that up, I guess. So let's go back really quickly and see if any of this is going to work. Wow, look at that. It actually finished. Of course it did. While we were talking and thinking it wasn't doing a thing, it was just actually not updating. So let's see if the Terraform plan works now. Now I'm really curious. We are not reading documentation. Rock on. I heard somewhere that if you don't consider that a failure, like you have to give up and read the documentation, but yeah, everything's going to work now. But you look at it in terms of typically when you do something, you eventually wind up doing that anyway. So if you just cut straight to that from the start, it's actually not giving up. It's cheating then because you're just cutting out all the middle stuff. You're just cheating and going directly to the docs. So let's do a Terraform apply and watch the magic happen. But again, this is just kind of background stuff. The plan tells you what's going to happen. And this tells you, hey, this is going to be replaced, so on and so forth. So yeah, good stuff. Oh, I usually do an auto approve, but I forgot this time. Okay, so let's go back here. I want to show, yeah, so here is kind of the summary, right? Helpful resources, just go to my GitHub repository, PPP, Star Watch, whatever. I will be updating. And I will be sharing all my findings, good, bad, or indifferent, because again, I like to deploy too. I don't necessarily care. I'm tool agnostic. As long as it helps me to get my job done faster, better, then great. So I'll share that, again, good, bad, or ugly. And again, if you want to follow the book, it's on Twitter and me. I'm on Twitter /X/ whatever we're calling it these days. Okay, so let's cover any questions while Terraform is doing its thing. Great. And let's see if I missed anything back up. I'll hydrate a little here. Can we see some Pulumi code? I don't have any for you here today, so sorry. A colleague of mine loves Pulumi. I just have been using Terraform long enough that I just lean into that, but I do need to play with Pulumi more. I'll tell you one thing. Here's a little pro tip for you. And I don't know if this applies to other cloud providers, but it certainly applies to us. Sometimes, for tech resources, it's always there. I mean, we do a pretty respectable job. I mean, you can always do better, but we do a pretty respectable job of sharing tech resources and making them easily locatable. However, not so much on the marketing side or sales side. And where that comes into being for us as developers is if you want to deploy to a particular resource, typically there are multiple SKUs. There are multiple levels you can choose. And I can't find those things anywhere, at least not easily. I mean, every time I have had to go looking for, let's see, what level of service of this service do I want? Sometimes it's kind of hard to find. I find that if I just go to bing.com and go to the Bing chat and say, what are the SKUs for service XYZ? Wow, it comes back and it has them all right there. And talk about super useful. So it eliminates a lot of time wasted that you might say, do I need this tier or this tier or this tier? As developers, we're very conscious. And if we aren't initially, we're thwacked and we become conscious of paying more for resources than we need to. So it's super useful to find the lowest tier that answers your needs, right? That fulfills your needs. And if you don't know what all those SKUs are, you could be missing a chance to save your organization some money and save you some heartache. So I just go to bing.com and hit Bing chat and bam, I have my answer and I'm up and running quickly. So that's really a useful shortcut, regardless of what you're using, whether it's a platform specific tool, platform independent tool, Pulumi, Terraform, doesn't matter. You're going to need those SKUs. And that's a quick way to get them. So let's see. It does seem more genuine when there are problems in Nevus. It feels a lot more genuine too. I can tell you that right now. It's just like you're offline and trying to work through something for the first time, or sometimes 50th time. It's like, this just worked yesterday. Why is this breaking? Okay, so yeah. Greetings, everyone from everywhere. It's so good to see you all. Gosh, I miss so many of you who I know, and those who I don't know. I'm looking forward to meeting in person one of these days, sharing coffee. As it is, I'm just happy to be here and sharing some time with you now. So thank you, Pablo. Let's see. It's still deploying. Well, say it's still destroying. So it's destroying one environment. It's going to go ahead and create the new one. But yeah, I think we're out of time, but such as it is. It'll finish 3 seconds after we disconnect. So I guess that's it. Anybody, any last questions you want to toss out?
If you want to do, Mark, we still have a few minutes. There's not a problem, so you can answer some questions. And if you see,
sure,
if you want to finish the demo, that's not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to wear out my welcome, but we'll see. Well, I keep checking it, and it's still just chugging along. Thank you. So I guess I should have asked a poll. What is everybody using? Do you use platform specific tools? Do you use any kind of platform independent tool? Mary, oh my gosh. Oh, Ansible. Awesome. Okay, that's a good option. That's not bad. By the way, do you know how Ansible got its name? I had to do a little reading on this sometime back, and I've never forgotten it because it's so weird. It's based off of the term answerable, which it's shortened to Ansible from a book sometime back, a book or movie. I think it was a book, if I remember right. So that's kind of a weird little trivia question. Let's see. So executor, I basically, if I'm doing anything, I just route it through GitHub Actions. So I just kind of let it do its thing. Hey, Mary. Terraform and Helm. Yeah. Yep. By the SCM system. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a good point. So what CI do you use, Mike, if I could ask? I may have lost Mike. Oh dear. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jesper. We appreciate it. Let's see. And it's still going. Well, this we'll keep this up and we'll see what it does. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, all of my code pretty much is in Git anymore. I used to pre-Microsoft, well, even long before that, I used to kind of spread it around to different backend environments. But oh, okay, never used Bamboo at all. But I haven't used Bitbucket in forever, so that kind of makes sense, I guess. Yeah, I think we're just gonna have to give up on this because it's just not happy. But anyway, I would encourage you to go check out the repo and stay in touch because there's much more to come. This is a really fun topic because again, the more I learn, the more I refine my pipelines. So I deploy my pipelines. So yeah, it's good for me and hopefully good for you too. So thanks everyone, and see you in the next talk.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark. It was awesome to have you here. Everyone's saying that's awesome. And here's the last one. Michael saying thanks. It was awesome. Thanks a lot, Mark. It was great.
Michael and Mike, yeah, appreciate it. And you're absolutely right about Jenkins and plugins. Wow. All right. Well, thanks all, and see you in the next session.
Yes, thank you everyone, and keep enjoying the Java Champions conference, right? So see you, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye now.